Family coming from a business background refused to help me out with my business startup and invested in my cousin's business instead because they immediately assumed failure from me. But now I've made it bigger than all of their businesses combined. And cousin's startup horribly failed, so now they're trying to get on record and call it a family business and team support. So here's what I did. I'm Zachary, 34 male, and I grew up in a family that was, well, comfortable. My dad had multiple businesses scattered across the city, real estate, retail, and a few others. My mom owns a couple of buildings, like buildings, plural. My grandparents, while not as wealthy, were the OG hustlers who scraped together enough success to give my parents their initial leg up. So yeah, business-minded people, generational wealth, and an expectation that if you're born into this family you're either gonna A, inherit something and not mess it up, or B, start your own empire. Naturally, I wanted to go with option B. I wasn't some clueless kid dreaming about opening a beach shack in the Bahamas, not that there's anything wrong with that. I had a plan, a solid one in my opinion: cybersecurity. Ever since I was 14 and accidentally hacked into my school server to change my detention record, I've had a knack for computers. I went to college, got my degree in computer science, and spent hours obsessing over encryption, data breaches, and coding. After graduation, I realized that cybersecurity isn't just a cool career, it's also a lucrative one. Every company needs it. Every bank, every hospital. It's like selling umbrellas in a world where it's always raining data leaks. I had a vision, a potential client base, and a detailed pitch deck that I thought would knock anyone's socks off. But here's the catch. I needed money to start, like a lot of money. I wasn't asking for 1 million, okay? Just enough to get an office space, hire a small team, and invest in some initial software and hardware. I could have started smaller, sure, but I had this very clear image in my head of what the company would look like. One morning I approached my parents. We were sitting in our living room and I presented my idea. I had graphs, I had market research, I had passion, okay? I asked them for a loan, not a gift, not free money, a loan that I would pay back with interest once the business took off. You know what they said? "Zach, we love you, but we don't think you have what it takes to run a business." They didn't say it cruelly. My dad kind of sighed as he said it, like it physically pained him to shoot me down. My mom gave me one of those pitying looks that moms give when they think you're being adorably naive. My dad explained that being a good coder doesn't automatically make you a good businessman. Running a company requires, well, running it. Handling accounts, employees, investors, losses, all the boring, not fun parts. And according to them, I just didn't have that spark. To them, investing in me wasn't investing. It was setting money on fire. I won't lie, that stung. It stung like hell. At first I was angry, like really angry. I didn't talk to them for a few days. I sulked in my room and dramatically stared out the window like I was in a sad indie film, but still I didn't want to give up on my dream. So about a month after my parents turned down my funding request, my cousin Bernard was getting married. Big fancy wedding, 3 days of events, champagne fountains, the whole drama kind of deal. At one point I was standing with my parents near the buffet table when Bernard walked up to us. He greeted my parents, shook my dad's hand, and then said, and I quote, "Uncle, Auntie, thank you again for believing in me and helping me with the funds for my hotel business. I couldn't have done it without you." Time stopped. I stood there staring at Bernard like he had just confessed to being a time traveler. My parents laughed awkwardly, said something polite, and quickly changed the topic. Meanwhile, I felt like someone had punched me in the gut. I had asked for funding. They said no, but Bernard got funding for a hotel. A freaking hotel. Look, I'll admit it, I'm not proud of what happened next. I excused myself, said something like, "I need to check something over there," and bolted. I ended up in this quiet corner of the hotel garden and I cried, like not a dignified single tear down the cheek. Nope. Full on ugly crying. I felt betrayed, not because they funded Bernard, I mean good for him I guess, but because they wouldn't do the same for me. And the worst part, it felt personal, like they believed in Bernard, they trusted him, but me, their own son, apparently I wasn't worth the gamble. At some point my grandmother found me sitting there. "Zachary, what are you doing here? Why aren't you inside enjoying the wedding?" And here's the thing about grandmas, you can't lie to them. You just can't. So in between hiccups, sobs, and sniffles, I told her everything. How I asked for money, how they said no, how Bernard got funded, how it felt like I wasn't good enough. She listened. She didn't interrupt me. She didn't tell me to stop crying or say something dismissive like, "Oh, don't be silly." She just let me get it all out. Then she said something I'll never forget. "Zachary, sometimes people see potential in others because they see themselves in them. Your father might see a younger version of himself in Bernard, but that doesn't mean you aren't capable. You're just different, and different isn't bad. It's just different." She squeezed my hand and said, "You're smart, you're hardworking. One day you're going to build something incredible. It'll just be on your own terms. I know that it sounds a lot of cliché saying, but this is what I needed at that moment. The day after the wedding, I was still in this weird emotional haze, like half motivated because of what Grandma said, but also half devastated because, well, feelings. I was sitting on my couch when my phone rang. It was Grandpa. Now, my grandpa isn't the kind of guy who calls just to chat, so naturally, I panicked. I asked him if everything was okay and he said that everything was fine and he just wanted me to drive down and see him. I didn't ask questions. I just said, "Okay, Grandpa. I'll be there in 2 hours." When I reached their place, my grandma opened the door and gave me a warm smile. "Come in, Zachary. Your grandpa's in his study." He was sitting in that chair when I walked in, but he immediately got up and hugged me, and that's when I started to relax a little. Grandpa didn't waste time with small talk. He said, "Your grandmother told me what happened at the wedding and how you feel about your business plans." "Oh, so that's what this was about." I nodded, trying to keep my face neutral. He continued, "I want you to know something, Zachary. I started my first business with nothing but an old van and a loan from my uncle. It wasn't easy and everyone thought I was going to fail, but I didn't. And do you know why?" I shook my head. "Because someone believed in me. Just one person can make all the difference." At this point I was already on the verge of tears, and then he reached into his desk drawer, pulled out a checkbook, scribbled something down and handed me a check. I froze. Now I'm not going to tell you the exact amount, but let's just say it wasn't pocket change. It wasn't everything I needed to launch my cybersecurity business, but it was enough to get started, enough to make a real difference. I just stared at the check for what felt like 5 whole minutes. Finally I managed to say, "Grandpa, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything, Zachary," he said. "This isn't just money, this is belief. I'm investing in you." And that's when I lost it. Yep, tears again. I was trying so hard not to ugly cry, but my grandpa just stood up, walked over and hugged me. "Make us proud, Zach." On the drive back home I kept glancing at the check on the passenger seat. It wasn't just money, it was proof that someone believed in me. After getting the initial funding from my grandpa, I knew I had to be smart about every single penny. I didn't splurge on fancy desks or sleek office chairs, nope. We started small. I reached out to my 2 best friends, Adam and Lewis. We pulled whatever little savings we had and rented a tiny cramped office in the sketchiest part of the city. But hey, it was ours. Those first 2 years? Brutal. We worked 14 to 16-hour days, barely took weekends off, and survived on instant noodles and vending machine snacks. Lewis would be on back-to-back calls, Adam would be buried in code, and I'd be, well, wearing 10 different hats at once. Marketing, check. Client onboarding, check. Troubleshooting servers at 3 a.m., you bet. Our first big client was this mid-sized finance company that had just gotten hacked. We managed to patch their systems, recover their data, and prevent future breaches. That project gave us enough money to move into a slightly better office. Slowly but surely, we started gaining traction, word of mouth spread, and we started landing bigger clients. About 4 years in, we hit our first huge milestone. We had enough revenue to consider expansion. We opened our second office in a nearby city, and a year later, we opened a third in another major city. By then, we weren't just some scrappy startup anymore. We were a real company. Around this time we also started a cybersecurity consultancy firm. It felt like the natural next step. Companies were asking us not to just fix breaches, but also to prevent them proactively. And let me tell you, consulting money hits differently. About 5 years into the business, I was finally in a position to pay my grandparents back. I drove to their house, check in hand, and told them, "This is yours, with interest." But I didn't stop there. Nope. These 2 had given me everything when no one else would, so I bought them a new house. Nothing ridiculously flashy, but cozy, comfortable, and in a neighborhood they'd always loved. Watching them walk through their new home, pointing out little details they liked, was one of the most fulfilling moments of my life. While our cybersecurity business was thriving, Bernard's Hotel wasn't. The pandemic absolutely crushed the hospitality industry, and Bernard's Hotel never quite recovered. Apparently my parents gave him even more money to help him out during those tough times, but despite their efforts, and honestly I do feel bad for him, the hotel eventually shut down. Do I feel sorry for Bernard? Yeah, I do. Running a business is hard, and sometimes even the best efforts don't work out. But did I also feel a tiny spark of satisfaction? Yes. I mean, I'm only human. It wasn't about Bernard failing. It was about proving that I could succeed despite my parents' lack of faith in me. Family events hit differently these days. I'll admit I do boast a little, not an obnoxious "look at me, I'm better than you" way, but more in a "hey, remember when everyone thought I'd fail? Well, check this out. So last weekend we were celebrating my grandparents' 50th wedding anniversary, and because they are literally the reason I have everything I have today, I wanted to make sure this day was perfect. I didn't hold back. I rented out a beautiful hotel ballroom, hired caterers, arranged a live band and invited basically every friend, family member and even some of the old neighbors they hadn't seen in years. Honestly, planning this event felt more emotional than some of the biggest business deals I've closed. I kept thinking about how these two incredible people took a chance on me when nobody else would. The party was stunning. Everyone was dressed up and the food was amazing and my grandparents were glowing with happiness. But then my parents happened. At some point during the evening I overheard my dad talking to one of his old friends. When his friend said that he must be proud of me, he responded by talking about family values and how their support and guidance set me on the right path. He also said how it's practically a family business now. Excuse me? What? I froze. I thought maybe I misheard, but no. As the night went on, I kept hearing snippets of conversations where my parents painted themselves as the backbone of my success. We always knew he'd do something great. We supported him every step of the way. It's just what we do as a family. Lift each other up. And the kicker? My dad actually said, "It's all thanks to the initial family support." At that moment, I wanted to scream, but I kept my cool. Look, I'm not saying I needed my parents to kneel in front of me and apologize with tears in their eyes or anything, but taking credit for something they actively refused to support after literally telling me to my face that I wasn't business material? Yeah, that didn't sit right with me. I tried to enjoy the rest of the night but I was really angry so I changed my speech. Now originally I had planned to keep it simple, a heartfelt tribute to Grandma and Grandpa, but after everything I'd heard that night I knew I couldn't let this slide. I started off lighthearted. I cracked a couple of jokes, mentioned how their marriage was older than the internet and talked about the love and respect they always have shown each other. But then I got serious and here's the part of my speech. You know, Grandma and Grandpa didn't just build a life together. They built a legacy. A legacy of love, trust, and most importantly, belief in people. When I had a dream and everyone else shut the door in my face, these two opened theirs. They didn't just believe in my idea. They believed in me. And I owe everything I have today to their faith in me when nobody else had any. I paused. My parents were staring at me, frozen smiles plastered on their faces. So tonight, I want to raise a toast to Grandma and Grandpa, the only two people who believed in me when no one else did. This success, it's yours, not anyone else's. Grandma was in tears. Grandpa was nodding with that proud, quiet smile of his, and my parents, they smiled through gritted teeth. About 15 minutes after the speech, my dad found me near the dessert table. He was basically yelling at me, "What the hell was that speech about, Zachary? Were you trying to humiliate us in front of everyone?" I almost laughed. Humiliate you? I just said the truth. You guys didn't believe in me and Grandma did. My mom joined in. You didn't have to air our family business out like that in front of everyone. You made us look terrible. At that point, I was already biting my tongue trying not to snap, but then my dad said, "You act like we didn't do anything for you. We gave you a good life, a good education. How dare you make us out to be the villains in your little success story?" And that was it. That was the moment I lost my cool. I didn't yell at first, but my voice definitely rose. You know what? You guys didn't believe in me. You had the money. You gave it to Bernard for his hotel without a second thought, and when it failed you gave him even more. But when I came to you with my idea you said I wasn't the business type. Do you know how much that hurt me? At this point I realized that the room had gone dead silent. Guests were staring. My cousin Bernard, the failed hotel guy, was awkwardly sipping his drink in the corner like he wanted to disappear. My dad pointed at me and said, "You're being ungrateful." And I snapped back. Ungrateful? For what? For your doubts? For your lack of faith? No. I'm not ungrateful. I'm just finally saying out loud what everyone already knows. I was done. My chest felt tight. My face was hot and I realized I'd just created a scene of what was supposed to be a celebration for my grandparents. I looked around and saw my grandma staring at me with this soft, sad expression. Not disappointed but just sad. My grandpa had his arm around her like he was trying to keep her calm. That's when the guilt hit me. I didn't say another word. I just turned around, walked out of the ballroom. I didn't even grab my coat. I got in my car, slammed the door and just sat there for a few minutes staring at the steering wheel trying to calm down. I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying the argument over and over again in my head, and the next morning I got a text from my grandma. "Zachary, we love you very much. Please don't feel bad about last night. We understand." That didn't really make me feel better. I've been thinking about it a lot. Reddit. Did I cross a line? Did I ruin a night that was supposed to be about my grandparents? Update 1. Hey Reddit, it's me again. Buckle up because things have somehow gotten worse. Now I thought things would cool down after that night. I thought maybe we'd all take some time and reflect and have a proper adult conversation later. But nope. My parents decided to go nuclear. It started small. Cousin texted me like, "Hey, Zach. Did you really guilt trip Grandma and Grandpa into giving you money?" That's what Uncle said. At first, I laughed it off because, come on, it sounded ridiculous. But then the calls kept coming. An aunt messaged me on Facebook saying she was disappointed in how I used my grandparents' emotions to get money out of them. I was floored. What? So I called my grandma immediately because I needed to know if she was okay, and she said, "Don't worry about what others are saying. We know the truth. And that's all that matters." She's honestly the sweetest woman on earth, and hearing her voice calmed me down a bit, but I couldn't ignore the fact that my parents were out there spinning some messed up narrative about me to the entire family. I'm not someone who likes confrontation, despite what my meltdown at the anniversary might suggest. But this time, I couldn't let it slide. I called my parents and asked them, "What the hell are you guys telling everyone? Why are people calling me and saying I manipulated Grandma and Grandpa?" To this, my mom said, "Well, you did cry to them, didn't you? You made them feel bad for you. That's manipulation." I was already on the verge of crying and told her, "Are you serious? I was crying because I was hurt, because you made me feel like I wasn't good enough. That's not manipulation. That's called having emotions." I heard my dad speaking in the background. "You can spin it however you want, Zachary, but everyone sees you for what you are now." I told them, "Okay, fine. Tell everyone whatever you want. I'm done trying to explain myself to you," and I hung up. I thought hanging up would give me some sense of peace, but it didn't. Over the next week, the rumors just got worse. One relative said they heard I threatened to cut Grandma and Grandpa off if they didn't give me money. Another said I bragged about how I manipulated them and laughed about it later. I felt like I was losing my mind. Like, how do you even fight back against something like this? It's so absurd that it feels almost comical, except it's not funny when people you care about start believing it. One day my cousin Bernard, yep that cousin, even called me. He said, "Hey man, I know things are messy right now, but do you think you could talk to Uncle and Auntie and just fix this?" I wanted to scream like, "Bro, you got funded twice and still failed and I'm the problem here?" But instead I just said, "There's nothing to fix, Bernard. They know the truth. They're just choosing to ignore it." That call with Bernard was the last straw. I realized something: my parents weren't going to stop. They weren't going to back down or admit they were wrong. And as much as it hurt me, I had to step back for my own sanity. I texted my parents, "I can't do this anymore. You've made your choice to spread these lies, and I can't keep trying to convince you otherwise. I'm stepping back from this relationship for now. I love you both, but I can't keep letting this hurt me." And that was it. I blocked them on social media because, yep, they were making passive-aggressive posts about me, and I stopped replying to family members who were clearly just fishing for gossip. I'm in a weird place right now. If anything happens, I'll keep you guys updated. Update 2. Hey, Reddit, it's been a while. I wish I was coming back with better news, but life's been heavy. So, yeah, my grandfather passed away last month. It wasn't sudden or dramatic. He just went to sleep and didn't wake up. Peaceful in a way, but man, it still hit me like a truck. He was one of the only people in my family who truly believed in me when no one else did. Losing him felt like losing a lighthouse in the middle of a storm. The moment I got the news, I packed the bag and drove straight to my grandmother's house. She looked so small and fragile when I walked in, but she still managed to give me a weak smile and a hug. I don't think I've ever hugged someone so tightly in my life. Planning the funeral was a blur. There were guests to call, arrangements to make, and a million little details that had to be handled. My parents were there too, and while we were civil, there was this weird tension in the air. Like we all knew there were unresolved issues, but no one had the energy to bring them up in the middle of grieving. The funeral itself was beautiful, honestly. Hundreds of people showed up. My grandfather was one of those genuinely good souls, and seeing how many lives he touched was overwhelming. Old business partners, childhood friends, neighbors, people came from all over to pay their respects. I tried to keep it together during the eulogy, but, man, I lost it halfway through. My grandmother squeezed my hand the whole time, and I'm so grateful she was there because I don't think I could have gotten through it otherwise. Now, here's where things got a little messy. My grandfather wasn't insanely rich or anything, but he did own a few properties, including this beautiful lake house. It's the kind of place you'd see on postcards: wooden deck, big windows overlooking the water surrounded by trees. My dad spent a ton of time there as a kid, and even I have some memories of running around the dock, fishing with Grandpa and roasting marshmallows by the fire pit. So during the reading of the will, the lawyers started listing out assets, and then we got to the lake house. My grandfather had left it to me and my cousin Laura. For context, Laura is my dad's sister's daughter. She's honestly great, super kind, always level-headed, and someone I actually get along with. But the moment my dad heard the words, "Zachary and Laura will share ownership of the lake house," I swear I saw his jaw clench. He didn't say anything right then and there, but his face said it all. He was pissed, like really pissed. After the reading, he walked out without saying a word to me. My mom followed him, and I just sat there awkwardly with Laura and my grandmother. For the next few days while I stayed with my grandmother, my dad avoided me entirely. If we were in the same room, he'd act like I was invisible. My mom would give me these weird half smiles, but she didn't say much either. It's wild to me because it's not like I asked for the lake house. I didn't even know Grandpa was going to leave it to me, but somehow it felt like my dad saw it as another personal attack. My grandpa was taking my side in some imaginary war. Laura and I talked about it one night over tea. She admitted that she felt awkward too because her mom, my dad's sister, wasn't exactly thrilled about the will either. But at least Laura's mom didn't go full cold shoulder mode. One afternoon, I was helping my grandma sort through some of Grandpa's old things when she sat me down and she said, "Your grandfather loved your father very much, Zachary, but he also saw how hard you worked, how much you fought to prove yourself. He wanted you to have something that mattered to him." I think she knew I was feeling guilty about the whole situation. Like, did I accidentally drive a bigger wedge between me and my dad? Did Grandpa unintentionally make things worse by leaving me the lake house? But Grandma said something that stuck with me. "Your grandfather wasn't choosing sides, he was choosing love. He loved you and he loved Laura and he wanted both of you to have a place where you could always feel close to him." The night before I left to go back home, I ran into my dad in the kitchen. He was making tea and I was grabbing a glass of water. For a moment it was just silent, neither of us said anything, but then he spoke. "You know, Zachary, that lake house was supposed to stay in the family. It was supposed to be ours." I replied, "It still is, Dad. I'm not selling it. I'm not turning it into a rental property. It's still ours." He didn't respond. He just stirred his tea, set the spoon down and walked out. I don't know what I expected, an apology, an argument, maybe even a hug, but I got nothing. Update 3. Hi everyone, this will be my last post. There are a few things I need to take care of now as my father has decided to sue me. He believes that the lake house belongs to him, even though my grandfather left it to me and my cousin Laura. I can't really discuss the details here because it's all very complicated and legal, but I'll try to give you guys a gist of what's going on. It started when my dad started showing up at my house unannounced, demanding that I do the right thing and give him the lake house. At first I thought maybe he was just upset and wanted to talk, but when I refused to budge he started making threats. He told me that my grandfather's will was wrong and that I was the one who was in the wrong for not sharing the house with him. It was like a switch flipped in him. Then came the papers. I won't go into detail, but basically my dad's team of lawyers sent me official documents accusing me of wrongfully obtaining the lake house and demanding I hand it over. He's saying that it's his inheritance, not mine, and that I manipulated Grandpa into leaving it to me. I mean, it's ridiculous, right? Grandpa clearly wanted me and Laura to have the house, but what hurts the most is the way this whole thing is affecting my family. My mom is still trying to play the mediator, trying to convince me to give in and just hand the house over so that we can move past this. She still hasn't fully realized what my dad is doing, and I'm honestly tired of explaining it to her. As for my relationship with my dad, it's done. I tried to reach out a few times hoping we could talk like adults. Every time I tried, he just got angrier. He's called me names, blamed me for everything, made it clear that he has no intention of backing down. I'm at the point now where I don't think there's any going back. I don't think we'll ever be able to repair what's been broken. Thanks for all your support, everyone. It really means a lot to me. This will be my last post about the situation, but I wanted to thank you all for being there and offering your advice, especially those of you who've been in similar situations. I appreciate it more than you know.